This is the Saturday Down South podcast. Subscribe to Saturday Down South on YouTube. I'm Connor O'Gara. Will the Indiana Hoosiers are national freaking champions? I woke up this morning expecting to just be like, oh, that was some unbelievable prank. Didn't actually happen. Indiana didn't win a championship in the hardest sport to win a championship. No, none of that actually happened. You just watched some really good movie. But here we are. I'm recording this from my hotel room in Miami, and I'm going to try not to be speechless because that's kind of defeating the purpose of hosting a podcast. But I'm at a loss, man. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I feel like much to the chagrin of many of the fan bases that we cover, Curt Cignetti sure did make this look easy, huh?
Man, did he? Unbelievable. I'm going to say that word so many times today. I'm going to be a bit all over the place. Apologies in advance. I tried to be as present as possible while watching this last night, and it still is just, it's so hard to fathom that this group, from everything that everybody of any iteration of Indiana football has known, was on that stage, and that confetti was falling down. I took some confetti home. Yes, I did. Of course I did. How could I not? And seeing the way that this fan base once again showed up, I am living in a fantasy world. We're in the post-game tunnel, and after all the dust is settled and it's like 20 minutes has passed, media members are just waiting to be able to get in the locker room and press conferences and all that stuff, and Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody comes on. Is it just real life, or is it just this fantasy? I don't know. I don't care, but it's awesome.
How are the pipes feeling, Connor? Did you get some singing done after the game? I heard Fernando going after a little Bohemian Rhapsody.
I did not get any singing done. The pipes are okay. The pipes are actually okay. Like Fernando in the post game, I try and keep it PG on this show. Let's just say your boy had a couple of non-PG moments, looking around to some of my fellow media members and just trying to take in the scene, man, because one-of-one experience in every possible way. And we're going to break down the game in a second here, but not to just make this about me and my experience and the Indiana media members who also, I talk to, and we're all kind of looking at each other like, okay, we realize why we're here, but we can all celebrate and appreciate this because it's just simply a road we've never had to cross in this field. But the outpouring of texts and congratulations that I got from people was incredible. And I can't thank people enough for saying so many nice things about my school, because my school on that stage delivered an all-time great. And it feels like we just watched a sports movie play out in real time, wherein these characters gave us these larger-than-life moments. And I never thought I would experience what that would be like after the 2016 Cubs. I've always said that's my one-of-one, given the way that things happen, with my dad dying a year later. My grandpa died within a year at age 95. And, first Cubs World Series in 108 years. I had accepted this reality that my sports fandom I was never going to experience a moment like that. I'll say this. This moment doesn't necessarily top like 2016 Cubs for me in that way, just because I didn't live and die with Indiana football in the same way that I lived and died with Cubs my entire life. But I've never felt more pride for anything outside of my own control in my entire life. That's how I feel right now.
Yeah, it just feels like, they rose to the moment. We've seen so many teams be kind of these cute stories, but then they show up to the bowl game, they show up to even the conference championship, and it's like, all right, let me get off the bus. And I mean, from the quote from Cignetti, they like slept on game day because he was so prepared. It just felt like a team that had been there before, which is so weird for a team that, I found the thing yesterday that they had misspelled Indiana on their jerseys in 2021. Have you seen the photos? Have you seen the photos of Cignetti's first home game?
It's bad. That was my college experience. Yep. And when you're 3-9 and it's been 3 decades since you've won a bowl game, that's what it should be like. He was so present in that post game. He was so understanding of what this meant, and talking about having a president who came from the South, talking about having an AD who understood that in this era, Indiana has barriers of entry that are so much smaller than what it used to look like. And it is truly the if you build it, they will come. And for those who want to say that IU football fans are fair weather fans, you think? You'd think, man. If Indiana had the same exact amount of support during this entire process, that would be the most ridiculous thing. But instead, this run is, as Cignetti said afterwards, and as Mikhail Kamara, who can't even get his name pronounced on the postgame podium as he's celebrating a national championship, felt bad for the guy. Even Fernando Mendoza, they said like, oh, Alberto Mendoza is coming up to the podium. It was not
Close,
not quite. But they said this is just the type of thing that you write a book about or you make a movie about. I'll say this. I don't know how you can possibly top that, because there are just so many moments, and we'll get to all of them in this game, in which it felt like, all right, mainly the Mendoza run, the Mendoza 4th and 5 run. You could picture Friday Night Lights, the music in the background, the ramp up to it, and this unbelievable, like, all right. And then it's the type of play, and I wrote about this too, it's the type of play that you would say, okay, that happened in the movie, but in real life, he just like found the pylon and, he got a little bit of space, and it wasn't really that dramatic. All of this was that dramatic. And if you even want to take it a step further, Georgia fans, I'm looking out for you. If you even want to take it a step further and say Carson Beck is the villain, which Lord knows Carson Beck is a lot of things to a lot of people. To a lot of Miami fans, he was the savior. Him ending the game with that interception to Amari Sharp, that felt like the good guy won. I'm not saying that's how it is for everyone. I don't want to speak on everyone's experience, but how can you script this any better? Like how can you recreate that story and do so in a way that is anywhere near the original? Because that played out in ways that I think even Hollywood's like, all right, come on, give us one of these things that we can kind of manufacture and create. But they'll have none of that.
what I really started to feel that way was the false start penalty. Whenever Indiana was killing the clock at the end, where I go, oh my gosh, there's going to be a chance for this Miami redemption. Like we're actually going to get the final, in the way that you're kind of setting up the villain or the comeback story for Carson Beck. And again, could have been a beautiful story for him. Could have been a game-winning drive for Carson Beck that completely changed the trajectory of his career, and he had plenty enough time to do it. And so, like, even that one play felt like, come on, guys. Like, even in this, you guys have been so clean all night. You're going to get a false start penalty right now. It's going to save a timeout, set Miami up for a chance to come all the way down, and then just salami sandwich. Boom.
Can I confess something? When that happened, and my heart sinks because it goes from 2nd and 1 to 2nd and 6. They want to be able to run, force Miami to use those timeouts. Only up 3 in that spot, that you got the 2-minute warning, and you're working against a lot of these different things. I wanted IU to throw the ball. I wanted him to put in Mendoza's hands instead of trying to be able to run the ball. Hemby had kind of struggled. Black was so much better in finishing runs and stuff like that. And instead, it kind of felt like, they settled in a spot where they usually don't settle. And they committed a penalty in a spot where they usually don't commit penalties. And I'm thinking to myself, man, Carson Beck is on that sideline. I don't care I don't care what Shannon Dawson said to him. I care what Ray Lewis said to him. And Ray Lewis is at his back. Ray Lewis, it looked like he said, this is football, or let's play football, or something like that. But if I'm Carson Beck in that moment, I'm ready to take on the world. And then you had the penalty with the late hit on that, which we'll get to the officiating, which in my totally unbiased opinion was all over the place in this one. But I'm thinking in my head with IU up 27-21 that Miami's got more than enough time to come back and win this game. And while this isn't typically the way that they've kind of gone on these drives, Tony breaks a tackle, or Fletcher, they can still run the ball if they want to with Fletcher. And instead it ends on this play wherein, as Mario Cristobal said afterwards, it's just a throw that had to be more to the outside from Carson Beck. It sounded like it was indeed a quarterback mistake and not so much on the route. And yeah, only when that happened did I think, oh my God, my school just won a championship. Well, 2019 LSU, I'm not going to do the thing where I say like, oh, that Indiana team beats 2019 LSU. I'll take 2019 LSU. So we don't have to do that. We can save that for a different time. But from an outsider's perspective, have we ever seen anything like this in college football?
I think that's what's so crazy. And again, thank you for not comparing them to 2019 LSU. I think
I will
that's
not
like
do that.
the bit at this point. But the thing about 2019 LSU was, it was like activating all these athletes that we go, oh, LSU always had these guys and they finally just got out of their own way. With Indiana, it's like they brought these guys in, over the course of these last couple of years. They completely reshaped the culture of the football team. And like I was talking to my mom the other day. She was like, what do you listen to for like motivation or inspiration? I'm like, I just listen to coaches talk. And Cignetti is like such an example. I'll just have a press conference of his or an interview of his on the background, and just how you set a standard and you stick with it no matter what every single day. And so I think that's just it is, and just a quick aside on this, being the guy who gets to run social for the games for SDS, I get to see all the commentary on all this. If you're the guy who's like, oh, Indiana has this old team, they have Mark Cuban, what's preventing your team from doing that?
Buddy, Mark Cuban hasn't donated anything until like this year for football. Okay, let's if we're playing the Mark Cuban card of that's unfair.
What about Phil Knight? That's the thing. Like we've all every school has had that booster, and so that's what people are doing already to kind of cheapen it. But it's like if it was so easy to quote unquote bring in these older guys out of the portal and get your every SEC team would be doing it. I think there is something unique to what Indiana has done, and it's about the standard. It's about being the only team that has gotten the bye week to win a game, and not just win the game, blow out Alabama. Like there's something different about what they're doing, and to act like, oh, well, it's simple. They've figured out the new age. Yeah. I don't think so.
Cignetti pushed back on that. He's like, if you think it's all NIL, like throw that out. Our NIL is not what you think it is. It needs to continue to get better. They've increased those efforts, but yeah, like if that's the card that you're playing, the fact that Indiana's got 47 players that are aged 22 to 25, and if you're like, oh, it's unfair, tell me what rule Indiana broke. Tell me what rule Indiana broke that anybody else could have done. 7 players from James Madison are on that current roster. I think they started with 13, but the guys like Aiden Fisher and D'Angelo Pons and Mikhail Kamara who have come over and set this standard. And it's not even just this year's team. They were talking in the post game, Mike Kadick, who's now at Barstool. I've referenced him a few times. They talked about how important he was and like welcoming these James Madison guys and kind of this blended family that they were able to create in year one. And that set the standard for what they're being able to do this year. But to think that this team became, in a year in which Steve Sarkisian starts off by saying, I think we're done with undefeated teams in college football, or if someone does that, build them a statue.
Build them a statue. I wonder if Sark's chipping in on that, by the way. Sark is such a quote machine.
Oh, man. He should build them a statue. He should, with some of that Texas money. 16-0, first 16-0 team since 1894 Yale.
No, hold on. You can't say that because North Dakota State fans will be in your bitches. I saw that. They were like...
First 16-0 FBS team.
There you go.
Yeah. With all due respect to North Dakota State, with all due respect to 1894 Yale, who I would never disrespect, even though they played 12 years before the first forward pass on record, Indiana's road a little bit tougher. In my unbiased opinion. All right. So we're going to go through some of the things that happened in this game. We're going to get to our way too early top 10, which I came out with that on Sunday. I'll be honest, I wrote it on Friday of last week. And so a couple of things have happened here and there, but nothing drastic has changed necessarily, like how I feel about a lot of those different things. So we'll get to that in a bit here. But I think if we're talking about iconic college football plays, the Fernando Mendoza 4th and 5 run is up there, at least for the playoff era. I'm not saying it's Vince Young against USC. I'm not even saying it's to the wow level of like Justin Jefferson stopping on a dime against Clemson, or some of these things that have happened in these unbelievable moments. Deshaun Watson on the pick play to Hunter Renfrow, or alleged pick play. But the 4th and 5 run, it's an all-time call. And if you're trying to figure out how did IU do this, did they just do this because they had older players or all this NIL money, whatever? No. 4th and 5, you're on the 12. Okay, you're up 3. I've watched a lot of football in my life. I think 99% of coaches kick the field goal in that spot and say, you know what, Miami, go score a touchdown to beat us. If we can't stop you, we deserve to be able to win this game. But you have 9.5 minutes left, and your quarterback in the quarterback run game has done nothing. I mean, they have hounded him. The right side of that Indiana offensive line was leaky. Ruben Bain is an absolute alien, and I'm already pre-mad at NFL people that are obsessed about his arms because that guy is incredible. I would take Ruben Bain over Fernando Mendoza. Is that a controversial take? I really would.
That's wild.
I
And
would.
I'll say too, how rare is it for a defensive player like that to consistently show up? Like the
He's
Chase
insane.
Youngs and stuff that we've seen, where it's like you're a good draft guy, but by the time you get to the CFP, you're getting double and triple teams. This dude has made an impact, even if it's just hurries in every postseason game.
And Mesidor, like Miami's front is so good. And they did things that really frustrated Fernando Mendoza. And as a play caller, if you're Mike Shanahan, the Indiana OC, I can't imagine what you're thinking is going to be the go-to play. And it's funny because not to just keep making this about LSU, but that 4th and 5 call to not only go for it, but then to basically say, hey, this is a quarterback draw. That's straight out of the Joe Burrow playbook. That is straight out of what they would do with him in some of those clutch moments. And he didn't have the coverage that he wanted. He ends up pinballing off 3 or 4 different defenders. He's got this awkward running style, which teammates make fun of him for because of how goofy it looks. But he said, I will not be denied in this moment. And I wonder too how much he's thinking about the hit that he took earlier in the game on that RPO in which he tries to throw a block, and the Miami defender probably came in too high on that. Cignetti definitely thought it should have been called, but I'm wondering how much he's thinking about all of those things in this moment, because that run did not reflect a guy that had kind of been running for his life at a lot of different moments in that game. But
there's a lot of thoughts you're talking about here. I think I could accurately depict what's going on in his mind. Okay, let's see. Oh bleep! Oh bleep! Oh bleep! Oh bleep!
Yeah,
I think that's all he's got time for. When he cuts left and there's 2 Miami defenders looking right at him, and he's got 3 yards to go, it's like, maybe this wasn't the right call.
I at first initial reaction was he didn't like what he saw. He didn't like what he saw and just thought, I'm going to run this. And that's not how you draw it up. 4th and 5, 9.5 minutes left in the national championship, up 3. But the way that he was able to pick that up, it was like, man, I think that was such a gutsy play, and we'll probably lose perspective of that. We'll have the still images of that, of the leap that it took to get into the end zone. But think about where his back foot hit. His back foot on that draw was at the 20 on that play. Think about knifing through that Miami defense with all of the pain that they had incurred on him. Some legal, some maybe not as legal. I had heard that Miami internally was making it a point to get to him by any means necessary, legal or not legal. Okay. That was well known within that locker room that they were going to make it
action.
hurt.
I can respect that. Okay.
Yeah. Like Miami was going to make sure that they were inflicting pain on him. And credit to them. I think they did that. I really do. And to go from back foot on the 20 to 6, didn't need 6 necessarily in that spot, didn't need a touchdown there, but they got it. And if you hadn't gotten that in that moment, Indiana had 1 timeout left. They had burned 2 timeouts in some key spots, and they burned 1 of them on that drive. So if you don't get that, it's 9.5 minutes left. Miami is roaring. They're going into their own section on the other side. And you would have had all the momentum in the world. You could have run the ball with Mark Fletcher Jr., who was darn near unstoppable. That guy's incredible. And I'm having a tough time not saying he might not be the best returning back in college football, even ahead of Kewan Lacey, even ahead of Ahmad Hardy, even ahead of Jaden Baugh. We'll discuss that at a later date. But they would have had everything. Miami would have. And the cause and effect of that play for Fernando Mendoza, it's just part of the story. It's part of the lore of this team, and that they just always figure it out. And that's what he said afterwards. We've been in so many of these tough spots. A lot of people want to talk about the dominance and how lopsided some of these games are. What will probably be overlooked is how clutch this team was. And this team in that moment needed to just give their guy a crease. They gave him enough of a crease to be able to make the play, and Fernando Mendoza does the rest, and it's an all-time college football play.
So you were there, so I'm sure you were able to see this, but have you seen the photos of his forearms?
Oh, I have not seen the photos of his forearm. I've seen the still images of the extension and obviously where he leaped from and all that.
Yeah, there's a photo going around that it's like his forearms are just like covered in red blood bruises, all that. And if you look back at the play, it's like he took so many hits that I didn't even kind of realize in this play. He just gets absolutely popped on the non-ball carrier arm. And then the way he just gets hit flush with his back in a way that you've seen, I mean, like the blindside style hit, right? Where a guy just gets hit in the back and momentum would force him to fumble. So it's just such a kind of like miracle to see a guy who is not a dual threat quarterback, not a big athlete. We're not looking at Josh Allen, Cam Newton here, who's been used to taking hits all year, because that's part of it. We can talk about the style points they've had, having that much left in the tank for a run like that, and not being used to really being smacked 8 different times on a play. The fact that he didn't fumble on this play after even getting the first down is so nuts. And I mean, the more I watch it, the more I'm kind of in awe that this guy was able to make this run. And it kind of goes to that point, right? Like, if people are looking at Mendoza, it's like, oh, maybe he's not the prototype, didn't have, a statistically big game here. But at the same time, like, that's why I think the NFL scouts are drooling over this guy, because he makes the plays it takes to win these games.
He really does. And I was thinking of all the takes that would come out about him as this, number one overall pick if he had not won this game, up 10 going into the fourth quarter, and what it would have looked like to see him fail, because there was a possibility that was on the table with the things that they were struggling to do, man. That offense, all of a sudden, they kind of hit a snag in the third quarter of that game, wherein even the most automatic play, the back shoulder throw to Elijah Surratt, was all of a sudden kind of falling apart and not necessarily there. And so I kind of wondered, what is it going to look like if Fernando Mendoza fails and he doesn't complete this unbelievable trio season, the trio that, gosh, I keep making this about LSU, don't I? The trio that we haven't seen happen since Joe Burrow, which is win a Heisman Trophy, win a national championship, and then, oh, by the way, number one pick. And I thought about what it would look like to see him fail. And we didn't. Instead, we see him get to celebrate this moment. But yeah, man, I think IU fans were 65% of the crowd of this game. That was my early take in getting into Miami. I knew pretty quickly IU was going to have them outnumbered. And that's not to say that Miami fans were, lacking or anything like that. They were loud. They were very, very loud. But it was weird because I didn't get the full sense of the atmosphere during the game, because the way that the press box is set up, you're in kind of the southwest corner of the end zone. It's not open air. It's closed off. So I was basically sitting behind Miami's creative team and Miami's like maybe not their SID, but one of the people in PR or something like that. So on top of that, I'm in the Miami end, and it's, glass and everything. So as things are happening in real time, if
You're
it's
watching the memes being made.
Yeah, essentially. Like, I'm watching the graphics come out. Oh, Fletcher, big time run, Tony, big time play, or something like that. And so it was kind of subdued for me. But there was a moment, 6:37, IU was up 3 after Miami had just had this unbelievable response post Mendoza touchdown run. And with 6:37 left, Hurt So Good, John Mellencamp song comes on. And IU section is singing it. They're belting it out like it's this anthem.
Oh, no, it's White Boy Wednesday. You guys are unstoppable now.
Dude, I felt in that moment like IU was unstoppable. It's this tense moment, but what a privilege it was to be in that moment. That's so cliche, but that was when I felt most present, was 6:37 in this game, and Hurts So Good comes on. And I'm just thinking to myself, you couldn't have told me any of this. Any of this is happening. And here we are on this stage. And what a silly thing that's happened, to understand the perspective of that. And look, a lot of people are going to continue to have a lot of takes about this team. And I know people have already kind of spun it forward. Hey, they're going to have a ton to replace. Charlie Becker returns for IU.
That's all you need, really. Honestly. Just get them a wildcat it. They'll figure it out. They'll win 10 games in the Big Ten.
Charlie Becker had 6 catches entering November. And he did that on that stage. I thought the first time when he was basically trying to carry 3 Miami defenders into the end zone, I thought he was in initially on first look. Still an incredible play. The amount of clutch moments that guy's had, that he was barely a top 1,000 recruit who was a non-factor on this team. At no, like, if you talked about what this team was supposed to be, even into October when they're winning these blowout games, at no point would you have mentioned Charlie Becker as a part of it. And instead he becomes an IU folk hero. I mean, he could never play another game for IU ever again. He's still going to be considered a legend. And he was the more consistent player. That's kind of the crazy thing. Like Surratt had that drop, which was IU's first drop of the playoffs. Surratt hadn't had a drop since October. And you're looking at this team going, maybe they don't have it tonight. Charlie Becker just always has it. I'm not saying Charlie Becker is going to return with the same hubbub of one Malachi Tony, one Jeremiah Smith, but let's have some conversations about that guy because he was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, man. Like I had kind of talked about, he's the third leading receiver, even at the time that I looked kind of going into the Ole Miss game. And yeah, it's just crazy to see guys rise to the moment like that, where the ball just kind of finds you. Kind of going back to the basketball metaphor. It's like when the lights turn on, the ball finds the right players, or you lose. And it kind of, that drop, to your point, was so uncharacteristic of Indiana. And then they went right back to what was winning for them, which is these big third, fourth down tries straight to Becker, one-on-one, where it's just like, yeah, he's unguardable.
Special teams in this game, huge. The block punt of one Mikhail Kamara was the play that IU needed in that moment. It was the first time that a blocked punt had ever been returned for a touchdown in the history of the playoff. And that play is such a tough look on all fronts for Miami. It's kind of a total special teams failure. If you go back to Malachi Tony fielding that punt inside the 5, which Ari Wasserman pointed this out, I think this year set a record for guys fielding punts inside the 5 in college football. I don't know why it's become a thing, but
it was a rough special teams performance for the entire CFP. We may never see special teams that low again.
Not so special. The special teams, Miami doinked a kick, which I hated that call. That was poetic justice. That was the college football god saying, Mario Cristobal, you're the offensive line guy. You have Mark Fletcher Jr. I know that you're not moving the football particularly well, but it's 4th and 2. And you're in no man's land. Oh, that was the college football god stepping down and saying, no. You don't just get to make it a 1-score game from that. But Miami special teams, it really, really cost them because that block punt was huge. IU had, I think, a 3-man rush on, and then like 2 guys who were spying on the back end of that just in case there was a fake. But what are you doing rugby punting out of your own end zone in that spot, man?
Like cute. Yep.
Oh, that was just devastating for Miami. And at a time in which, for a long time in the second half, that was all IU did right. IU didn't do anything in the third quarter. And Miami looked like the team that was making all these adjustments. And for that play to happen, I mean, it's the difference in a game. It's 7 points in a game that IU wins by 6. Well, we do need to praise Miami for the responses that they had in this game, because when they fall behind 10-0, and they're sitting there with 35 yards of offense with 5 minutes left in the first half. And I was talking to our guys, JD Piquel and Brooks Austin and Trey Wallace. We're talking at halftime, like, guys, what can Miami even do to stay relevant in this game? Because this has the makings of IU's defense shutting them out. I don't know how they're going to be able to consistently move the ball against this defense when for so long everything just was stuck in the mud. They had like a couple of nice runs to start off the game, and then after that, it was basically IU was always going to be in the right spot. And I do think that that's going to be so lost in this game, especially because of how it ended. But man, like Miami put together one of its best drives of the 21st century after the Mendoza touchdown. That was a 10-play, 81-yard drive in which they just cut through hot knife through butter. And I do think that we need to, if we're still hating on like Mario Cristobal or things about this Miami team, I think that's kind of lame, because that wasn't, this team just isn't clutch, they can't get it done. No. Lesser teams would have gotten blown out in that game. They would have looked at that offensive start and they would have not been able to find answers. And there's maybe a Shannon Dawson conversation to be had here. And one of the things that I had heard was that Mario Cristobal and Shannon Dawson weren't exactly on the best of terms, and there could be a parting of ways, which is a weird thing to say about an offensive coordinator in a national championship. We'll see how that plays out. But Miami kept responding. And in a lot of ways, if we're talking about the sports movie script, it was so much better that Miami kept responding, because if this had been 35-7 or 35-14, as I predicted, this wouldn't have been an all-time national championship game. And I think Miami's response is a key ingredient in what made this game so good.
Yeah, there was a point in this one. It was at I think it was 147 left, right whenever Miami was like mounting their final drive. Both teams were tied at 318 yards, which like just
Yeah.
goes to show like how close this game actually was. And when the block punt that we just hit on happened, it felt like kind of an exhale moment. It felt like, oh, this is the thing that IU can always kind of do, find a way to get these weird points, and then they start snowballing. And what we talked about in the preview is once Miami gets behind, how are they really going to respond when they get behind a couple of possessions, when things are going their way? Are they going to stick with the run game? And credit to Miami, like to your point, exactly. Like 9 out of 10 times you see the team in this situation start to panic, start to kind of lean on Carson Beck earlier than they had to. And in that spot, I love that drive. I love the play call to get in the end zone to respond. And it immediately validated that decision by Curt Cignetti to go for it with Fernando. Because obviously if they kick the field goal,
It's a great
you're
point.
living in a completely different situation.
Yeah, it is. And look, I will say, Mark Fletcher got the benefit of a nice little hold on the outside on that long touchdown run on the 57-yard touchdown. They let them play in this game, a game at which pads were popping. This was a physical football game. If you were a defensive back and you ever wanted to commit a crime, you could have done so during this football game with the way that it was officiated, because once that ball went up in the air, it was like, hey, the purge can happen. We're going to maul receivers. We're going to hold jerseys. And it just didn't matter. And some of the non-calls in those spots, and I know that the Cignetti quote at halftime is kind of what went viral. He basically said, like, hey, and he said that again post game too, of those should have been called. And in the NFL, those are 100% called. We're talking about the future number 1 overall pick, the Heisman Trophy winner, not getting that call in that spot. Now we can debate whether or not Fernando Mendoza should have thrown a block in that spot on the RPO trying to sell it, because once you sell that, obviously you're still considered a football player. The Miami defender looked like they came in high, and they looked like they were, let's just say it, they looked like they were trying to play after the whistle as well. And I'm not going to do the thing where I say this Miami team is dirty, like the way that all those other Miami teams were known as, but they let them play, and that was advantage Miami. And what I thought was a really, really big way in some of those spots.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Miami, that's kind of what you want to try to do, right? Is say, okay, we're going to test this team and punch them in the mouth and, really impose our will. You talk about the talent, the physicality that Miami has shown, particularly on defense. And it's one of the only times where a coach comes into the halftime complaining about officiating, and I'm not really rolling my eyes because number one, you're winning, right? Like you're winning at that point, I think 10-0 at half. And it's like, hey, and then what that does is it circulates all the clips online of these like Fernando Mendoza getting popped, guys getting held, stuff like that. But when you take an officiating crew that's not exactly from that conference, it goes to show, like to your point, they really have nothing invested in like quote unquote protecting the quarterback or doing anything. What they really want to do is not be the story of the game. And we've kind of seen that in the story of Miami football, having that late flag. That we've agreed is the right call, but just that the cinematics of it. Wow, that's my industry. That's how you know we're early. The cinematics of it made it look a little bit more dramatic than it was. But yeah, like I think the refs just tried to not be the story, which hey is kind of positive when you have two physical teams like this. And I feel like Indiana responded. To be honest, I feel like Indiana in the second half realized they could get away with a little bit more, started punching back a little bit more. And even though Miami was more successful in that second half, there were some big plays where you go, even some of the Becker stuff, you go, oh, he's not like running from the hand fighting. He's not trying to like lean into it. He's getting away from it and kind of doing it himself. And I think they actually adjusted to things not getting called, which is really hard to do within the course of a game.
Really hard, because I thought there were a few moments in which Cignetti was going to lose his usual temperament. And I thought he definitely was frustrated. And if they end up losing that game, we probably play the results and say he should have been more focused on what was happening on the field and being able to stop Mark Fletcher and being able to have a better response offensively. And instead, obviously, IU does indeed respond to the physicality and to all these different things that were going on. I thought afterwards, seeing Cignetti speak, I wondered how he was going to be present. And I wondered how he was going to put perspective on this. He did say that they were going to have an off day on Tuesday, back to work Wednesday.
A little cold beer?
Dude. So that was what I asked him in the post game. And we went 25, 30 minutes, and I'm thinking to myself, how has no one asked this man what beer he's drinking? And so, of course, I had to fire that one off. Upland Brewery, which is a great local spot in Bloomington, is a Hoosier game day lager that he had already had one of by the time he got to the post game, and he said it was so good that he wanted to have another one. That man earned it. That man earned it in every possible way. This collection of talent, this collection of coaches, it's so unique. It really is unique, and you kind of get a sense of just why this thing worked, with how unselfish it is, all that. But it's Cignetti. Like it all comes back to him. It all comes back to this demeanor that you can just believe, you can buy into. And he talked about how he had this atypical, unprecedented path that he took as a coach to go from being on Nick Saban's staff at Alabama and being in this spot where he said, okay, I'm not a coordinator. And if I continue on this path, I'm going to be a 60-year-old assistant. And I don't like the life that those coaches live. I don't. And I think I can do this. And he said it took 1 year with Nick Saban on that Alabama staff. Now he stayed for 4 for him to realize he had the pieces to become a head coach. And he knew the way that he wanted to run the program. And that's what, like, between being the son of a coach and having that experience with Saban, combined with his career, that's when he knew that he could do this. But he'd be lying if he said that when he made that decision to leave, what was it, 15 years ago, that it would end up on this stage and playing out this way. This group was irrelevant at the start of the decade. James Madison, the only things that you talked about with them was whether or not they deserved to be able to play in a bowl game because of their move from FCS to FBS. And so many of these guys, the Surratts of the world and the Kamaras and Fisher and all these guys in Ponds, they started at this place where they saw such a different level of football. And you could tell what it meant to them to be celebrating a national championship, knowing that it was their guy. And they just have always believed in their guy. You just never heard this questioning of Cignetti, no matter how ridiculous the things he has said have seemed in the moment. The 3-9 team is not supposed to get up there in a basketball school and just MF all the rivals. I mean, that's basically what he did in those moments. It's not supposed to turn out like this in year 2. And so now everybody's having the question with Cignetti, who can replicate this? Is there...
Hold on. That was a lot. Can I just
Yeah. Sorry, that was a lot.
So I think I'm fine enough to say this, especially because there's just so many people that are like, I guess, especially because we cover the SEC, haters or whatever. Not they won. I feel like I can say some stuff that I was thinking. I don't think him and Saban like each other. They don't. They don't. And what's so funny is that, there is the cool kid circle. There's a group text we talk about with Sarkisian and Kirby and Lane. And those are Saban's kind of favorite kids. And he's at their graduations and taking the pictures. And he bet against Curt Cignetti. He passed over Curt Cignetti. And he was wrong. And I think that...
To be fair, can we clear that up? Cignetti left. He wasn't in a position where he was in like the club that you're talking about with Kirby Smart and Sark and those guys. They were coordinators. And so I think part of that friction is because Cignetti went so rogue that it wasn't the typical Saban coaching tree of, hey, like, you're going to be here maybe as an assistant, then you're going to come back as a coordinator or do what Mario Cristobal did. And I think that's part of it. I think Saban's always kind of looked at that and gone, you think you can do this on your own? But Cignetti has admitted he needed that time with Saban to get to this place.
But I'll say it like this, man, even looking at like a Pete Golding, Saban has kind of said, I don't care about your age. I don't care about your experience. If you're ready, you're ready. And I think that he kind of kept Cignetti there for a year or two longer than he would have. And I think by doing that, he kind of let him know, I don't think you're one of these guys. I don't think you're going to elevate to the level of even like a Billy Napier, who, he did like. And so that being said, like, I think that is a kind of a miss by everyone, even within the greatest coaching tree that we've ever seen, where you have all this talent floating around. And I mean, Kirby is still, number one. He's got the 2 back-to-back titles, a little bit different era in the 14 playoff, but Cignetti's right there. And I said this whenever, they had that big win in the Rose Bowl, like, he's the best Saban assistant going. And I think that with the way Georgia's season played out, I think they're neck and neck right now. Obviously, one title separates them. But when you look at the 12-team era, when you look at both conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC, looking to expand in some fashion, which I hate it, but it's reality, who who is more prepared for that than Curt Cignetti, who has already taken a program from zero to the 12-team playoff quicker than we've seen, teams go from a 14 playoff success to a 12 team. And just a quick little jab here, Oregon just getting completely passed over is so funny to me because they were waiting in the wings, waiting in the wings, waiting in the wings, and then boom, Indiana comes through. So anyway, on to your point about who could replicate this.
Yeah, they flipped the way that we think about the Big Ten. And so maybe some will look and say, well, what could a team like Northwestern or Rutgers pull this off? And I think that simplifies it a little bit too much. I really do. I think it simplifies when this happened, how this roster construction went down, the process that it took for a 64-year-old head coach, in which you look, a lot of people aren't hiring a 60-something head coach at a power conference job, his first power conference head coaching job. It's just not a popular thing to do. And so IU took all of these things and basically said, let's whatever, like the previous thing didn't work, so why wouldn't we go with something like this? And so it's going to be such a hard thing to recreate because of the timeline. And I saw Jeff Goodman talking about this as well. What's the college basketball equivalent to this? And it was 2021 Baylor winning a national championship with Scott Drew, with the situation where they started the 21st century with literally a murder on their own team and an internal murder that gutted the program, and NCAA violations and whatnot. Just was a program that was left for dead and was on the brink of the death penalty, that came back and was able to ultimately win a national championship and become one of the powers in college basketball. This is still different, though. It's still different because of how expedited the timeline was. And even Mario Cristobal at Miami, wherein Kirk Herbstreit fuels all of this money and basically says, Miami, you don't spend like a program that cares. It took them 4 years to get to that stage, to get to that place where they felt like they had these homegrown guys and they spent the right way with NIL and in the portal and all these different things. To do this in year 2, I don't think it's ever going to be I don't think it can ever be an expectation, though many people are going to wonder now, well, who can be the next Indiana? Can a Kentucky do it? Can a Rutgers do it? Like those are going to be the questions that people will ask. And I will not hold my breath. I just simply won't.
Yeah, and some of it has been like, oh, you guys are enjoying this championship too much. Obviously, it's your alma mater, and I just love a good story. I have no reason to hate Indiana, right? But you look at last year, and it was Ohio State versus Notre Dame. And it's like, that's truly a title game that I feel like a hater and I want no one to win. And so I say that to say this title game is going to just, I think, send ripples through college football. And this is going to be such a sliding glass doors moment, because how is it going to affect the Miami program, who, maybe was a little bit ahead of schedule when you look at the talent on the roster? Maybe they didn't expect to get this far, right? What does that mean for Dawson? To your point, is he in a good spot? Is he not? Are they going to run it back? Are they going to upgrade? Do they keep this same model going forward, thinking that's their clearest path to a championship? And on the other end, any coach that got hired, your AD is now looking at, or your donors really, not as much your AD, because your AD is a little bit more level-headed, but your donors are looking at Cignetti going, hey, Lane Kiffin, hey, John Summerall, you're coming into this situation. We had all this talent and we got a big stadium and we got all these expectations. And if they could figure this out in Bloomington, Indiana, you better figure this out here. So it's really going to show who's sane, because those of us that know this is different realize that it's different. But some fan bases are going to start ticking the timer on their guy,
The one thing, you're right. It totally changes how we should view roster construction and from all those different things. I don't ever want to hear another coach say, I just needed a couple more years. I don't ever want to hear that again, because
we have the still refugees from James Madison. To your point, we have the, Matt Campbell gets the Penn State job and brings all the Iowa State players. That first boat through are still on this team competing in a national title.
You have a year 1 advantage too if you're a head coach, and Alex Golesh is taking advantage of this at USF, and Lord knows it's what Bob Chesney is doing at UCLA, coming over from ironically enough James Madison. You have this year 1 advantage that is so different than how we used to think of rosters, and if you can't take advantage of that, that is on you. And it's not to say that everybody should be competing for playoff spots and national championships in year 2. But miss me with that if that's not necessarily a huge evidence sign that you're taking that next step in year 2 and, you just don't have the roster that you want yet. That's not to say every situation is the same thing. And Lord knows that there are tougher rebuilds than others. And this was as tough of a rebuild as you can have without major NCAA penalties. You know what I mean? Like, you just couldn't have sold this vision and just simply snapped your fingers if it was as simple as, oh, you hired the right coordinators, or oh, you had a few of these guys who were really good players that came over from James Madison. It took literally all of these pieces working, and then year two to be able to hit Mendoza in the portal, a guy that a lot of people wanted, a guy that Miami at one point felt like it was going to be able to go out and get, and all the local ties that he had. So we're going to try and find the next Indiana. I'm going to appreciate this Indiana for all my biased reasons, of course. But it's going to be so difficult. It has changed the way that we should think about this. And all of a sudden now, third different Big Ten team wins a national championship. That is a flex-worthy stat if there ever was one. Big Ten fans, they have every right to be able to flex about that in the same way that SEC fans did so when they accomplished that feat multiple times during the run of 2006 to 2022. So, yeah. Look, we're going to have a lot of different takeaways from this season. And I tried the best I could to not just spin it forward to next year. But Will, any last thoughts before we spin it forward to a way too early top 10 for 2026?
I think you just hit on it there. We were right all along. You don't judge year one coaches, right? So give them a year, and in year two, it's safe to expect 16-0, right?
I judge the crap out of some year two coaches.
Year two is, I think that's what we can learn from this, is year two is when you really have the ability to do something. And yeah, I mean, who would have thought, man? We always talk about, 2014, 2015, Ohio State wins. You take the leap, move to Florida. We think it's going to be the new Big Ten dynasty. Well, the Big Ten dynasty is here, and it's your Indiana Hoosiers 10 years later.
Unbelievable, man. Who would have thought? All right. Way too early top 10, just because we have to do this. I came out with this on Sunday, like I said, and I was talking to my guy, Brad Crawford. Great to be able to see Brad, who's the best SDS legend, of course. And I was talking to him and I said, hey, I moved up my way too early top 10 because I felt like everybody started doing it before the national championship. And he's like, oh yeah, we used to do that too. And then we actually decided to move it back and stuff with the way that the portal works now. So I think I did not, I'll say this. I did not read anybody else's way too early top 10 or top 25 before I came out with my own. So some of these rankings you might look at and go, that's all over the place. Maybe that's not consensus. This is early. Okay. A lot of things that we're still figuring out. There's still guys in the portal that can be added, of course, even though the portal window has closed. So there are moving pieces with all of these. I mean, Indiana just lost a strength coach to Tennessee. I mean, who knows how this thing is going to change.
They just lost Fernando's brother. I mean, there's no culture in this program anymore. Look at this. The wheels are coming off.
Yeah, just win a championship, and all of a sudden everybody just wants to leave. It's just the 98 Bulls all over again. Okay, so let's start with this. I'll go through my top 10, and then we'll kind of get into some takeaways with these specific teams, and then we'll get out of here. I have LSU at number 10. I have Oklahoma at number 9. I have Texas Tech at number 8, the fighting Cody Campbells. Notre Dame at 7. Miami at 6. Might even move the Canes up a little bit higher. I did that before the Darian Mensah transfer reports came out. Number 5, Texas. Number 4, Indiana. Yeah, what a time to be alive. Number 3, Georgia. Number 2, Ohio State. And number 1, your Oregon Ducks, Dan Lanning. Yeah.
Oregon number 1. This guy's an anti-homer. You're hedging. Oregon number 1.
I thought about this as I process what IU did to, as we said, like flip the balance of power in the Big Ten on its head. But think about what Oregon now has with Dante Moore returning. They have a loaded cast of receivers. They're getting Evan Stewart back off the season-ending injury. Their backfield is going to be healthier than it was in the college football playoff, where they're down to like fifth-string guys. But what really is impressive, and what's going to be the topic of conversation in this pivotal year for, I think, like how we talk about Dan Lanning, this defense, man, is built to go. They return their entire defensive line. They had 3 all Big Ten selections on the defensive line, which was kind of a year early. And they're going to be able to get a secondary that is kind of in the mold of what those peak Georgia teams would have with Kirby Smart and with Dan Lanning. They get Coy Parrish from Minnesota. They return maybe the best cornerback in college football, and Brandon Finney Jr. So you have all of these elements that are working in their favor. Yes, they lose both coordinators. That's going to be a topic of conversation. Yes, everybody's going to talk about how lopsided it was with Indiana, but I think with Dante Moore coming back and with all the pieces that they have in place, this is a team that's going to look at the way that this year could set up with potentially, IU taking a step back, a very slight step back, albeit from a dominant Peach Bowl showing. And I do think that Oregon is worthy of that title. I would not, absolutely not, have had Oregon at number one if this were Dylan Raiola as the starting quarterback. But he's your backup, so I guess life could be worse.
Yeah, I mean, hey, he's the best backup in America. But yeah, it's two different things, right? The questions I have about Oregon aren't really going to be answered in the regular season. I fully get where you're coming from here. I think losing both coordinators is a really big deal. But I think that ultimately, again, we're projecting week one. So like a little bit of that is hype. It's not saying who's going to get exposed or anything. I get it. I just think, because of the pedigree of Ohio State, Georgia, Indiana, our last several national championships, I would put Oregon a little bit behind them.
Sure.
Just because I do trust them at this point, because we're starting to see a little bit of that fall off with, Oregon needing some very Penn State things to happen against Penn State, right? Last year, like it feels like they did take a little bit of a step back, even from the previous year, although they did win the 2 playoff games, whatever. So yeah, that's my take on the top of it.
Oregon lost to that Indiana team. That's it, and maybe the rest of the schedule was favorable. They still dominated Texas Tech. Offense didn't look great. I still have a lot of faith and a lot of confidence in what Oregon's going to return. I think this is not a title or bust type of season necessarily. It's still too early in Dan Lanning's career to be able to sit here and say that. He's 39 years old. But I do think that people look at this team and go, man, this is the mold of everything you've been building towards. And with Dante Moore coming back, it just kind of changes how we're going to talk about the sense of urgency that team could have. I think they will be the Big Ten favorites coming into the year. Maybe not national championship favorites, but I do think that they will have that type of building, or Ohio State will have it. And I threw out this question: if you just knew that Ohio State was going to return Julian Sain and Jeremiah Smith and only 3 stars that had never played football before, would they still be a preseason top 10 team? Because I kind of think they would.
Yeah, Ryan Day is now becoming kind of an asset, right? Where it's like after last year, it's like, okay, well, you could at least trust them to guide you to the postseason. I do have one question here. What are we thinking about number 9, Oklahoma here?
Oklahoma's underrated. Oklahoma's underrated. And I think the John Mateer return, if he's healthy, that's part of it. I think the player that he was down the stretch was not necessarily the guy that we, saw in the first part of the season. I think being able to return that, I think is really important. I think getting Isaiah Satania back is really, really key. And I love what they returned still on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's kind of going to be overlooked because of the blown lead against Alabama. People felt like Oklahoma, because of the lack of offensive firepower, wasn't particularly good. But Brent Venables just fielded a top 4 defense in college football after losing his 2 best players to the NFL draft. So I understand you're going to lose some studs, all right? Like you're going to lose Peyton Bowen on the back end. You're going to lose a guy like our Mason Thomas, but you're still looking at that team going, man, they have talent. They're going to have one of the best secondaries in college football with Cortland Guillory coming back, with Eli Bowen coming back. Taylor Wine was a breakout star for that team this year. I'm looking at Oklahoma going, I think people are kind of sleeping on them with what they returned. So that's why I kind of slotted them. And like, I don't think they're going to be that different than who they were this year. And who they were this year was a top 10 team, albeit one that obviously had its limitations.
Yeah, a lot of that was, to your point, health. A lot of that was kind of like the offense looking a little out of sync at times. And we kind of went into this with the Arbuckle part of the DOC, where I think that, bringing him back for one more year, as long as you have Mateer, you've already kind of got the pieces there. So I'm with you there, kind of getting in early on Oklahoma. I think Texas Tech could be a little bit low as Sorsby coming in. Notre Dame, I'm done talking about them. I cannot wait for the Miami Sky is Falling loss, because they had 2 of those this year. Like that's the thing about this Miami run is like, great team, they played really well. Doesn't exactly answer the questions of, are you going to have this stinker? Because it took them to the last week to even get in the postseason.
That's true. That is true. But they returned Fletcher and Tony.
And that's really all you need. Exactly. Especially in the ACC, dog. Especially keeping that playoff revenue that we talked about. It's a little bit of a wagon in the ACC.
Yes. I don't think Miami is necessarily going anywhere. And I think that what Corey Heatherman did with that defense makes me feel like they actually deserve some grace. And that's kind of why, same thing, why I have Indiana at 4 is that that defense is going through a massive transformation. And a lot of their key portal additions have been on the offensive side of the ball. You get an interior runner for the offensive lineman from Wisconsin. You're going to be able to get someone like Nick Marsh and Josh Hoover, like is key portal additions that are going to help on the offensive side of the ball. But the only reason that I have, like, if IU wasn't able to retain Bryant Haynes, and at this point, IU looks like it will retain their defensive coordinator, who is a finalist for the Broyles Award. I feel like that team was so prepared at every step. And I understand you had a lot of these guys that were in year 4 and year 4 of that defense, and that matters. It really does. But I think that's what gives IU the ability to start off in the top 5, and why I would put them just right behind Georgia, who has this defense that returns so many young pieces that showed a lot of promise. Raylan Wilson coming back, KJ Bolden coming back. I think Elijah Griffin's going to be really fun to continue to get the Jalen Carter comps, Ellis Robinson the fourth. Like, Georgia's defense was kind of a year away, and being able to return Gunnar Stockton, the top 3 there, all of those teams return elite starting quarterbacks, in my opinion. That probably has too much say in these preseason rankings. I fully acknowledge that. But the reason I feel like those 3 are there is because I really trust a lot of what they have on defense. Oregon has the coordinator change, of course, but 3 of those top 4 teams will return elite top level defenses that I feel like I can set my watch to. And as we saw in this college football playoff, with how Indiana controlled the first half of that game with its defense, with what Miami did defensively in some of these games, I think that matters. And I think that as much as we're going to look and talk about the quarterbacks, these defenses are going to be really, really good at the top of the sport.
So I think we hit on everybody here. We talked about Texas previously. Coach Poop, good.
Okay, so can we get to one other thing here? Other thing, the asterisk. We had talked about this before. Ole Miss.
Oh, good point. Okay.
I put the caveat in the way too early top 10. If we find out that Trinidad Chambliss gets his waiver, okay, which as of this recording, 9:30 on Tuesday morning, what day is it? What year is it? What life is this? If Ole Miss gets Trinidad Chambliss back, preseason top 5, and I know that they lost a lot in the portal, especially late. Your Bayou Bengals just swooping in at the 11th hour, Will.
You know what? Let me just reverse jinx myself. I'm glad you brought that up. LSU, you got them here at 10. I think they're about a tackle and an edge rusher away, because they haven't been able to get those. I don't know if I like him in the top 10.
We'll see if they get Jordan Seaton, the Colorado offensive tackle that everybody wants. But yeah, maybe is that kind of overlooked, of having LSU start off in the top 10? That is the Lane Kiffin expectation. I think the portal class, even if you're not necessarily a full-on Sam Leavitt believer, I know there's been at least some sort of pushback, but I think retaining, we've talked about it a lot, retaining Blake Baker was so important. Being able to get Whit Weeks, being able to keep DJ Pickett, like, they're still going to be really good defensively, and the coaching staff that Lane brought in makes me feel confident in this team. So I think that there are just too many elements that make me think that LSU is going to have this like disastrous year 1. I'd be stunned if that happened. LSU should be an improved team, which is a wild thing considering this year started with me predicting LSU to win a national championship, and it ended in a disaster. And here I am saying, oh yeah, preseason top 10.
Look, man, I'm going to be booking my ticket soon for LSU Clemson week 1. I think you should be there. It's going to be a moment in SEC history for whatever comes. Another one, me and Perry were talking about this, September 19th, the Ole Miss game. But take it back to Ole Miss. I didn't mean to derail you to talk about LSU. I just had a little joke in there. But I think that, Ole Miss finishing the season that they did does give us a little bit of trust in them. But I think so much of that too is Chambliss. And I think if you keep Chambliss without Weiss, you have enough to kind of get your feet under you for the first part of the season and say, hey, we can trust this guy while we figure it out.
John David Baker stepping into a very interesting situation, running that offense at Ole Miss after he did really good things at East Carolina with, Lord knows, lesser talent. But I am not assuming that Trinidad Chambliss is back. Okay, at this point, I am assuming that he is off to the NFL. And look, if we find out that Tom Mars has worked his magic and the courts of Mississippi has made the decision to somehow get a favorable ruling, then we will update those rankings. I would move them ahead of Texas. And I think Chambliss is such a big part of that. Maybe that's controversial. I've seen a lot of the early Texas buzz. We talked about this in the last pod that we did. too many questions on defense for me to feel comfortable with Texas. They're going to win games in a different sort of way, explosive plays, shootouts, even if Arch doesn't necessarily make that year two starter progression in the way that many assume he will. I still think that Texas has so much firepower on offense now with what they've done in the portal. So, yeah, that's about it. Oh, I didn't have Bama in the top 10. Should we briefly talk about that?
Yeah.
Late additions on the offensive line. I'm kind of underwhelmed by what Bama has done in the portal. I really am. It's the first time I think I've looked at the roster construction and gone, that's it. Bama has not started outside of the top 10 since 2008. I think there's a really good chance that they start outside of the top 10. Like, I think they were 12th in the way too early FanDuel national championship odds or something like that. And I thought they would be able to get some more proven players on that offensive line. It was kind of a one-way street with the defensive line and the portal. I know that they got the guy from USC, but I'm kind of looking at Bama going, guys, I'm not a hater by saying I don't think they deserve to start off in the top 10. I would still trust Kalen DeBoer to win a lot of big-time games, but I think that roster has legitimate questions at a lot of key places. Outside of the secondary, I don't really look at any of those pieces of that team as like a surefire thing that you can set your watch to. And that's kind of the problem.
Look, man, you know how high I was on Bama this year. I was a Ryan Grubb believer. Looks like I was wrong. And so I'm not going to say this as a hater, but I'm going to say it as a realist, right? Like, whenever DeBoer took over, they had that 24/7 Sports composite talent rankings where they said this is the most talented team since we've tracked it that a new head coach has ever walked into. And, there are questions about recruiting. I think he's answered those really well. But it is worth noting that Alabama, despite how they've looked on the field, has on paper had a talent advantage in almost every game they played under DeBoer, right? And when you take, the locker room was able to be held together, then you bring in those really impactful guys, the Brailsfords and the Jeremy Bernards from Washington. And so they kind of had a peak in talent the last 2 years. So you kind of need to have a great portal class to keep it at that level. So, but Bama's issues, like we talked about, were not player wise. I don't think it was a little bit of injury here and there. Right? You like to have Cuevas in some spots, but that shouldn't be make or break. It really did come down to coaching. It really did come down to discipline in these big moments, not being able to run the football. And I think a lot of that's mentality. We saw that with Cignetti, where, hey, we can't run the football in this game, but Mendoza can right now, like picking your spots. So I really think there are a lot of questions. There are most questions I think I've ever had for Bama going into this next year, where this is where Bama is typically locked in and just completely made a fool of me. But I do think it's worth noting that their talent is at a bit of a low during the time we've been watching Bama.
Yeah, it feels like it. And the year three outlook is just not as promising. And for Bama fans that watched a year two coach dominate their team en route to a 16-0 season, it's tough to now look back and go, man, why weren't they able to have this year one culture in place? And why couldn't they mesh all those pieces together when they obviously had a lot of that runner-up team from Washington move on to the NFL, but you were still able to bring over some of those guys. You're still able to bring over some of those assistants. And now you're kind of looking at this going, what's the future? What is the foundation? What is this team going to turn to? If Keelan Russell is the real deal, that changes everything. Okay. But we haven't seen it. They don't have a guy on that roster that attempted a pass against power conference competition until Austin Mack came in for an injured Ty Simpson in the Rose Bowl. So there are questions galore, too many questions for Bama, in my opinion, to start off in the top 10. Maybe that's exactly what Bama needs. We will see. All right, well, that's a pod. That is a national championship, an Indiana national championship pod. I got to get out of this hotel room in a few minutes here, but just know it means everything. It means everything that you guys have been rocking with us this whole year, this whole season. We're going to be doing pods once a week during the off season. We're going to have a tiny little break. We're going to record next Wednesday, I believe, is going to be the plan for us temporarily. So I guess that's an 8-day break post national championship. I'm going to be taking a trip back to Siberia, aka Chicago, for some reason with Claire. So we will be recording middle of next week instead. But just thank you so much to everybody that's reached out to us, that has sent kind words to not just me but to you as well, and has been have made us a part of your college football season. And we hope that you continue to do that throughout the off season. I'd like to think we do it as well as anybody with off-season content and the way that we talk about this sport. And we're going to have a lot of fun things planned to keep you interested, because I realize now this is the depressing time of year in which you realize there are no games left on the college football calendar and the season is officially over. I am sad for that reason and that reason alone, but I am happy for every other possible reason. So thank you. Means the world.
This has been one of my favorite college football seasons.
Me
of all
too,
time.
man.
And I mean, it's like even taking out your connection with Indiana, even if you went to, Illinois, I would have thought that this would have been a great season.
I would never. No, I'm kidding.
Illinois hater number one. No, I mean, I like looking back at this year and all these different inflection points, all the different questions we had about teams, how they got answered in different ways. Even though the SEC didn't make it as far as many of us anticipated, I think that the story of the season is one that, certainly you'll be telling Claire one day, I'll be telling my kids one day. This has been, there have been wallpaper seasons in college football. There have been seasons where not a lot happened. The top two teams stayed the same, top three, and we all just kind of send to the end of the season. It was boring. Saturday to Saturday, man, every Saturday felt like something was happening. It was like, how many bloody Saturdays were there this year where we'd look up and at the start of the day think we knew what was up, and then by the end of the day go, I don't know if I know anything about this sport. And so it's been an absolute joy, stepping in this role and the social media side, the love and honestly grace that you guys have given me from kind of putting on the coat again, as Drew Lock likes to say, and taking over a social account. It's been a minute for me, but we set some really record numbers with SDS. I'm really proud of it this year. So yeah, this has been a storybook season for your Hoosiers, and I think for us as a pod, really just goes to show why we do this, why we've been rocking with each other and with you guys. For you guys that have been with us kind of since day one, there have been so many memories, so many people we've met. Drew Page Perry, who, like I said, I got to watch the game with him last night. So yeah, man, I'm getting emotional here just thinking about how much I love this sport. So I'll turn my page and go, thank God I get to watch LSU's real championship team, Jay Johnson's baseball fighting Tigers.
One day, Will. One day you will be in a press box with perhaps tears in your eyes, smile, watching your LSU Tigers win a national championship. Yet one day you'll experience what that feeling is like. I'm sure. Like you'll get there, buddy. Don't worry.
I'll be honest. I would rather be hammered on the sidelines, like I was in the stands, like I was with my mom, giving her a big hug. But yeah, man, it's cool that we both celebrated championships on this pod.
Look at us, man. Look at us. All right. Please leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the STS Pod, at Sat Down South, at TJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.